introductory remarks and then pass it over to get the meeting started. So, good evening, everyone. I'm really excited that we're all here in person for the first time. We've got folks online. We're doing our first ever hybrid ATC meeting. So as we go through the meeting, just sort of pay attention to what works, what doesn't, and hopefully we can just sort of course correct over the months as we, keep trying to do it this style. So my name is Willow, and I'm the City of Eugene staff rep for this meeting. Before the chairs convene the meeting, I have a few reminders and introductory words. So I actually want to begin tonight's meeting by acknowledging that it's being held on Kalapuya Iwiki, the traditional indigenous homelands of the Kalapuya people. This Monday was Indigenous Peoples Day, so I thought it would be appropriate for us to start our meeting off this way. So tonight I offer the Indigenous First Nations people of our community, both past and present, acknowledgement of your resiliency and contributions to our community, while also humbly acknowledging what was taken from you. Today, Kalapuya descendants are citizens of the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde Community of Oregon and the Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians of Oregon. They continue to make contributions in their communities here and across the land we now refer to as Oregon. We express our respects to all displaced Indigenous people who call Eugene home. Okay, let's jump into the purpose of the Active Transportation Committee. The first is to advise the City of Eugene staff and community organizations and partners on the implementation of Eugene's pedestrian and bicycle strategic plan. The second is to represent community and constituent interests in transportation planning decisions. And the third is to provide feedback to staff on projects relating to walking and bicycling. Eugene City staff will consider recommendations from the ATC along with input from all other members of the public during the decision-making process. Please keep in mind that this meeting is being both recorded and live streamed to YouTube, meaning that it can be viewed on the City of Eugene Transportation Planning YouTube channel, both right now and in the future. The live transcription feature for closed captioning has been enabled, and all verbal and written commentary will be held in the public record. Today's meeting will begin with our usual 15 minutes of public comment period. The public comment period is an opportunity for individuals to speak to the Active Transportation Committee on transportation-related issues. Each person will have 3 minutes to speak. To indicate you would like to speak, if you're online, please use the raise hand feature within Zoom now. You can go ahead and do that, and the chairs will call on you when it's your turn, and staff will unmute you at that time. If you're in person and you would like to speak, I note that, and we can get through the online folks first, and then we'll have you go after that. When it is your time to speak, please give your name, your city of residence, and if you live in Eugene, your ward or neighborhood. If you want to leave your contact information online, you can put it in the chat. And if you're here in person, there's a sign-in sheet over there where you can put your contact information, and that way we can respond to you if we have comments we want to respond on. Okay, at any time during the meeting, you're welcome to ask a question using the Q&A function or the chat feature. For discussion with other attendees and committee members, comments will be monitored and recorded, and anybody making inappropriate comments will be restricted from the live portion of the meeting. Questions will be answered at the chair's discretion. As a reminder, civil speech supports everyone in feeling comfortable and sharing their perspectives and opinions. So let's give one another the respect of courteous and civil speech tonight. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to the chairs to continue.
Okay, well, thank you. I'd like to, first of all, acknowledge that I have never even attended a hybrid meeting, much less chaired one. So if anybody has any way of helping me out, I'd appreciate it. And I'm going to have to turn it back over to Willow because I can't get on Wi-Fi and have no idea who's. Oh, wait, who's somebody?
Okay, we can do it from here.
Hands
So
up there.
I'm going to open up participants here and see if any of the attendees are raising their hands for public comment. Doesn't look like we have anyone online, so we'll go ahead and get public comment from the person who is here, and then if anyone online after that wants to make a comment, we can hear from them.
And first of all, I'd like to acknowledge that this is Connie Berglund, who was on the Eugene Bicycle Committee with me many decades ago.
Right.
So she's got some history with bicycling, Eugene.
Awesome. Connie, if I could, before you give your testimony, if you wouldn't mind coming and kind of standing near Sue, that way the folks.
Is that where the
This
camera
little-
is?
The camera's in
this
the
little
middle, so
thing
if you
is-
just kind of stand in front of the screen, the folks,
Or stand over there?
yeah,
Oh,
the
okay.
folks online should be able to see you in
That
that
little
way.
Oh,
thing is the owl that.
okay, this is just a very quick thing. as more of a maintenance question, for the city is that I think we have an increasing problem with particular type of invasive weed along some of the older streets, particularly ones that are done in and cement, you know, with the, creasing. And it's a very wide spreading lateral weed. You can see it along, excellent example be along 29th between Amazon and Willamette. And I think it'll become an increasing hazard that'll sort of move over and make it either tangly or slippery. As I see it's growing more and more and taking more and more of the bike path in various, especially the older places that have that split. So that's just a note maybe for the city, if there's a way. I know it's in a drain, so it's, you know, there's a water problem, but they maybe something like 20% vinegar or something. Because if you, I think if once we have rain, it may become very slippery or other problems. It grows very well in the winter, so it's very aggressive. Anyway, that's just a little side note on maintenance. Thank you. It's
Okay.
wonderful to see you all in person.
Yeah, thanks for
Thank
being
you,
here.
thank you. Okay. And I will note that I got an email from Duncan Rhodes, who was not able to attend, but he wanted to call our attention to the same issue about crosswalks being lower than the surrounding streets that he has pointed out to us before. So he wanted to make that observation known. Okay, any responses or any other comments? No other hands up?
Don't see any other hands up, so I think we're good there.
Okay, and Shane, can one of you convey to the maintenance folks the concern about the?
Yep.
Okay, great.
It's in our notes. So we'll pass it on.
Okay, thank you. So the next item on the agenda is to approve the summary notes of the September 2022 meeting. I hope everybody had a chance to read them. I will entertain any corrections or motion to approve them.
I move to approve it.
I guess I'll second.
Okay, so moved by Julie, second by Josh to approve. Any discussion? All in favor? Say aye or raise your hand or do something. Looks like everybody's hands up. Okay. Okay, with
Oh,
that,
let's
I,
real quick, Sue. Oh, sorry, never mind.
yeah, I thank everybody. I saw had their hand up. Is
Okay, perfect.
there any way to, can we adjust the lights so it's a little easier to see this?
Unfortunately, no, it's all on or off
Yeah.
Yeah.
with these lights.
Okay.
We think that there's a new monitor or new TV being installed.
Oh.
eventually.
Hopefully, but it's already here, so by the time, I think we may have a new screen. We'll see.
Okay, well, with that, I will turn things over to Clarissa. You remember Clarissa was on the group of students from the U of O, students and other people from the U of O who got to go to Denmark and Denmark and the Netherlands, and we're eager to hear the report.
Fantastic. Would it be best if I stand up close to the screen?
I think so.
Okay.
And I'll go ahead.
I think so. Unless you
You
have.
can sit there, but your presentation will be up there,
Yeah,
so if you're gonna wanna like
Yeah.
point
Oh,
at things, I think that. So let me get that going. I'm like doing all these screen things. It's kind of, oh, there we go. Easy. So you can just kind of give me a, when you want the slide to change.
Just like that.
Whatever
Okay,
makes sense
perfect.
for you, yeah.
All right. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Clarissa. I'm a current 3 PM student planning public policy and management at the
Sorry.
University of Oregon.
I'm gonna
this-
share the screen. Sorry,
It's
Clarissa.
okay, no worries, no worries.
There we go.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Fantastic. This past summer, I had the opportunity to participate in the Sustainable Bike Transportation in Europe Study Abroad. We spent 2 weeks in Denmark and then 2 weeks in the Netherlands. In total, we traveled to 6 different cities by bike and public transportation. Within this entire month, I didn't enter a car once. And the most surprising thing to me was that instead of experienced reduced quality of life, I actually had a better quality of life by being able to take part in and to bike everywhere. Thank you for having me talk about my experience. Okay, so arriving in Copenhagen was astonishing. I had literally never seen so many bike commuters in my entire life. And it was honestly slightly overwhelming to see so many people out biking. Everyone we talked to though denied being a cyclist. Yet all day long we saw people who looked like this, Next slide. And this, and next slide, and this. Biking here was normal. It was just a way to get from point A to B. It wasn't political, and we never saw any spandex. Professionals we talked to said that this is critical to lowering the barrier to entry to getting more people on board to cycle. Next slide, please. Thank you. And in all honesty, it wasn't about the bikes. It was about the enhanced quality of life that we experienced and that people in these societies experienced there. They had freedom in time and destination. Almost always, biking is literally the shortest route to get from one destination to another, and it's the fastest way to travel. And it was way easier to park. There was bike parking everywhere. It was so cool. Biking in these places, I felt prioritized in a way that I haven't really ever felt in the state. We never had to compete with cars on the roadway, and it never felt like we were jostling for space. This made it feel a lot more relaxed and comfortable. With that safety ingrained, it felt like you could kind of take your mind off and do something else. And additionally, a city with less traffic, less cars has a lot more space. Next slide, please. There was space in the city for people. This was probably an old road that they were able to redo in a cafe. Next slide. And they were able to reclaim space for parks. We actually biked through right here, and there was a giant cycling highway right next to it that people would pass this all day long. Next slide, please. And also for walking and biking streets, which were just fantastic to go down. So, how do you set up? Oh, thank you. So, how does the cycling culture work? It's really about setting up the city so that people have easy access to their destinations. They've put people close to them by having mixed use. And people would tell me about how they would stop at the grocery store when they were riding home. You know, would just be on their commute, easy homes. They just stop in and grab what they would need. They have a slightly higher density there, and this enables there to be more destinations close to people, easy to access. People would talk about on surveys how they would ride because it was easy, it was quick, it was convenient, and it was comfortable. So city planners and designers in these areas really focused on making those things greater, making it easier and simpler for people to use. This here is a pedestrian bridge or a biking pedestrian bridge over the bay in Copenhagen, and it connected two separate parts of the city. So cyclists no longer had to go all the way around the bay. They were able to just quickly get across this other part, which was really great to increase networks. Next slide, please. And additionally, there was huge feelings of safety. It really changed my perception of the city to be able to see bike commuters all day long. It felt like, okay, if I have an issue here, there's going to be someone here who can help me out. Additionally, every street had a cycle track. These are cycle tracks. So they're dedicated lanes that are a little bit picked up off the roadway. And you didn't have to compete for space at all, except for maybe with other cyclists, which felt a lot less dangerous than with a car. Additionally, when there was construction, there would always be a way around it. So you never had to think, okay, is there going to be a place for me if I turn down this road? The answer was always yes. And so this made it far more relaxing. It really decreased that mental load. You didn't have to think about the next step or 3 steps ahead. You just knew that the infrastructure was going to be there and it was going to support you. And this really made the cities a lot more reliable feeling. That transportation was a lot more reliable. And another way they increased reliability was having really good lighting. They wanted people to be able to use their infrastructure 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. So they plowed. When we have maintenance and needs, they would take care of it just to make sure that it was reliable that whole time. They said that their transportation network would only be as good as their weakest link. So they had to bring up that weakest link. And I think that that's something we can definitely take away here. Because of this high level of safety, it actually made cycling way more accessible to youth and elders. So in the States, we have this thing called 8 to 80, where we want our active transportation to be really good for people who are 8 to 80. Surprise, we have people who are younger than 8 and older than 80. And they also need to be able to use our infrastructure to be able to get places. Children grew up on bikes here. They would ride with their parents, and by the time they started learning to bike, they were already really comfortable with it. We visited a traffic garden here, and children as young as 2 or 3 started learning to bike. It was so cool. They would start with these little push bikes, and then they would graduate to pedals. And it wasn't about, the regulations or the rules of the road. It was, what can we do with this tool? How can we play with it? How can it enhance what we're doing and enhance our quality of life? Which was fantastic. And that led to really high levels of independence in children. Additionally, when this infrastructure is really safe enough for young people, it was also safe enough for older people. And it was great for elder adults. Elder adults could also use three-wheeled bikes as an adaptability solution or electric bikes to extend their range. At the end of this presentation, I have a picture of me riding a three-wheeled cargo bike, and a man named Clyde let me ride his cargo bike. Clyde was about 76, 78, if I'm gonna ballpark it. And he was so sweet. He said he loved riding every day and that it really made him be able to connect and engage with his community. Next slide, please. So how did it happen? When I arrived, it really felt like a cycling paradise. But in all reality, they just started investing in the 70s. So really not that long ago. There were two concurrent events, the OPEC oil crisis and car-free Sundays. I love this picture because this lady looks so happy. She just looks like she's having a fantastic time out in her streets, which is possible because there's not cars taking up that space. And then also the Stop the Kindermorg protests, which were childhood traffic fatality protests in the Netherlands. So with money going into bike infrastructure, it quickly became much easier and cheaper to bike in these locations. And suddenly, it was the easiest way to go. Reframing the transportation system in this manner actually didn't take all that long or that much money. Next slide, please. Thank you. So how did they do it? This is the largest parking garage in the world, and we were able to bike through it, which was so cool. This is actually a bike road. So you would be biking along, and then all of a sudden you'd be biking inside a parking garage, which was like multi-storied. And there were 12,656 bike parking spots in this garage. So another way to deal with parking that I thought was really cool. And who knows, you need that much bike parking. Next slide, please. So the elevated cycle track. This was prevalent in both the Netherlands and Denmark. And in Denmark, almost every single road had a cycle track. They had contraflow cycle tracks, so you would bike one way and cars would be going on the opposite way. There'd be one-way street for cars. If you were comfortable, you could bike in the road with the cars. And then because the cycle track was going the opposite direction, if you wanted to stay on the cycle track, you would have to go up the next street. A larger road would also have two cycle tracks, one on either side, just to make sure that you would have that available to you. These were about 2.2 meters wide, which is wide enough for cargo bikes to pass each other. So you definitely had a lot of space, which was really nice. And they had little curb mounts like this that were really easy to hop on and off wherever you felt like, wherever planners and designers thought that people would want to hop on and off. And they're pretty good at predicting that. Next slide, Pete. All right, so intersections. Intersections can be kind of intimidating as a cyclist, and they've really worked to slow them down and make you feel like you're safe in them. One of the ways they've done that is by pulling out the bike stop lane way in front of the cars. That way, when cars are stopped at a red light, they can easily see cyclists. Bikes also have their own dedicated signal, and they get a green first, so they get way out of that blind spot. They then get a red first, which will allow cars to complete any turns that they need to do. Additionally, they didn't have beg buttons, at least in Denmark. They did in the Netherlands sometimes, but that was so nice. It was just one less thing to worry about. Next slide, please. All right, so traffic calming. Drivers are usually going to drive whatever speed is comfortable to them. And sometimes that doesn't adequately take into consideration the dangers of the road for other users. So traffic calming is physical ways to indirectly communicate with drivers the real level of safety on a road. That can be visual tricks such as trees close to the road or little strips of brick to make the road appear narrower. It can also be other physical things such as chicanes or bulb-outs that will make cars kind of weave through and slow down a little bit. Oh, and this one here is rough surfaces on the road and then also speed tables. And that noise is actually scientifically proven to slow drivers down, which is fascinating and super cool. However, the cyclists still get that nice smooth pavement so your ride is not bumpy, which is so good. Yeah, so slower speeds are better for all other users, for cars to do. Next slide, please. Okay, so filtered permeability. So filtered permeability lets active transportation users through, so cyclists, walking, skateboards, scooters, but it prohibits cars from going through places. These can be flower beds. We would see those on the ground, giant concrete flower beds. They don't actually look like a filter permeability, so there weren't a lot of photos of them, and I don't remember taking any. And then also just like bollards like this. So at a network level, the Dutch were really good at doing this. They would separate areas like this. So each of these different colors would be like its own kind of neighborhood, and cars would have to enter the green arterial roads to be able to get to a different color. So that was really great at making sure that cars couldn't cut through the neighborhoods when there's a lot of traffic on the arterials. There's a lot of other drivers driving. So this also made it though. So if you live right here and you wanted to visit your friend who lived here, you could get in your car totally, like no one's stopping you, and drive all the way out, all the way on the green road to your friend's house. Or you could hop on your bike or walk, shoop, and you're there. So it really, like making these circuitous routes and making walking and biking the shortest, literal shortest way really helped to inspire people to use their bikes and walking. Next slide, please. However, if so many people are choosing to bike and walk, it's actually easier to drive. That's a lot fewer people you're having to compete with for road space. Drivers said that cyclists were more predictable. They were easier to navigate around when they had their own area that they could know that they were in. So every mobility plan also needs a car plan. Next slide, please. So main takeaways. Planning for mobility doesn't mean planning for cars. It means planning for people. So we need to lower our barrier of entry to cycling to get more people up and riding. And if driving's easier, people are going to drive. But if biking's easier, people are definitely going to bike. We need to focus on our connections between networks so that everyone can plug in no matter where they're living in the city. And we want biking to be intuitive so that it's way easy to jump up and ride. Additionally, we have a lot of challenges and also a lot of opportunities here, but there are many of the same challenges and opportunities that they had there. They're just a couple decades ahead of us. Next slide, please. So this is Clyde's bike. He was so kind. There was so much that I wanted to talk about and so little time. So if you want to learn more about my experience, I put a QR code up to my blog if anyone's curious. And I just like to leave you guys that it's not about the biking. It's about easy transportation, clean air, safe streets, improved mobility for youth and elders, and a better quality of life. Thank you for listening. Now we have about 10 minutes for questions.
Thank you very much. Okay, any questions, comments, observations?
So you were both in Holland and in Denmark, right?
Mhm.
So what would you say were some of the differences between the two?
The Netherlands has reached this critical point in cycling where so many people cycle that their off-street or like their cycle tracks are no longer big enough to accommodate their cyclists, which is amazing and phenomenal and not necessarily where we're at. So it's harder to talk about and compare for us because they've taken roads and like full roads and turned them into Fietsstrassen, which is like an entire road dedicated to bikes. Cars can go down it, but they're expected to go really slowly and kind of navigate out of the way of cyclists. So I think that would be my main takeaway.
Did you do any multimodal, like get on a train with a bike or get on a bus?
There are too many bikes for them to allow bikes on trains and buses for the most part. There are some instances where that is possible, but they're pioneering systems where you can rent a bike to do that last mile, rent a bike to get to the station, get on the train, travel an hour, 30 minutes, wherever you need to go, get off, and then rent another bike in that location. Or people will have two bikes, one to go to one part, get on their train, go to their next part, get on, use their next bike to go to work. Yeah. Also, we were traveling with like 30 people, so 30 people and bikes, we did it once, it was chaotic.
It looks like we have a question from an online.
Yeah, I have a question concerning, there was a picture you showed there of the cycle track next to the road. And I thought you mentioned that the cars, when they go on the road, it's a little noisier than the cycle track. Now, was that like a safety factor or just trying to discourage driving?
It's a safety factor. So the cars will slow down if it's more noisy for them. It's been proven that when it's louder, it's more annoying to drive back. So if they slow down a little bit, it would be less loud. So they are trying to do that. So that would make it safer for the users.
Okay. Yep, thank you. Because I was thinking that might be an idea, like next to the cycle lanes on the roads over here anywhere, if they made something that would make the cars, you know, create noise like they do like on the highways, then they would enter our bicycling lane.
Yeah, that would be super interesting.
Yeah, I have a question if nobody else does. I was wondering if the fact that ordinary people are traveling by bike, does that change the behavior of the bicyclists? Because quite frankly, I sometimes find it safer to ride around cars than around a lot of bikes, because bicyclists here are just totally unpredictable. They're, you know, whereas at least with most cars, I know what they're at least expected to do. Whereas it's kind of a free for all for bicyclists here. So when you have that number of bikes, do they behave more normally?
I would tend towards no. However, bikes are going at a slower speed usually, and so it was easier to avoid collisions. And small collisions that did happen were very minimal. They wouldn't really be that big of a deal, but I didn't often see that happen. I maybe saw that once, and it was like somebody accidentally nicked somebody else.
So you didn't see people trying to race along the path, or I guess.
Oh, yeah, they definitely did. But you would I would ride on the right side and they would go up behind me on the left, and there'd be enough room to pass that it wouldn't really make a difference. Yes.
So I actually did the class a few years ago and just the Denmark and Sweden part. And so I'm sort of curious, like what you thought about in Copenhagen, where there's just that kind of little cobble and just like the slight raise from the traffic,
Mhm.
and how that felt compared to in the Netherlands. Was there more separation, and like how did that feel? You know, here when we're doing protected bikeways, we're trying to, you know, like on 13th or East Amazon, we're trying to build like more concrete separation. And so I'm just wondering, like, should we be looking at an approach like Copenhagen where they're just doing that like slight raise and cobble, or like what can we take away from that?
Well, I can only tell you my opinion, but I think that the Netherlands has gotten to this point where there's so many cyclists, they kind of spill out of the cycle tracks areas. And they had similar cycle tracks in both areas, but then the Netherlands really focused on those. They would almost be like greenways for us, except for they would only be like one lane for cars, so cars would have to like weave around everything, and they would slow like way down to like 10 miles an hour. I found that the Danish cycle tracks were easier to navigate around.
Because
I don't know if that necessarily answers your question.
what was it about?
I think that they were more standardized.
Okay,
Yeah.
very interesting.
I think we have Mary on there, and I think I saw Andrew with a question too.
Andrew was there.
So let's start with Mary and then go to Andrew.
Hey, Clarissa, I want to say thank you very much for presenting. We thought it would be really good to hear from her so that we all have this. People have had different experiences around this kind of thing, but to have this shared experience as a group, we thought would be really valuable. And we really appreciate the time that you took to put this together and to present. And what I'm wondering is if after having this experience that was sort of, I don't know, nirvana or something, when you come back, do you feel either less hopeful or more hopeful about making change, that we can make change here in Eugene?
That's very interesting. I think that sometimes it's hard to imagine what you could be without seeing it. So I kind of never thought that biking could be that way, or that it could be so easy or normalized, or that it could be or could feel so routine. So coming back, there definitely was about a month where I was like, wow, this is really hard to be navigating around cars and to have cars pass really close by me going really fast. And that was a moment where I was sad about it. I won't lie, but to see that and then like know to kind of have it next to what I'm studying in school, it was very much okay. This is what I want to keep doing. This is fantastic. You know, there's definitely a fight ahead, but I think that it's one that we can 100% do. Sorry, no, wait.
Thank you, thank you.
Andrew, are you? did you have
I'm
a
good. My
comment?
question was pretty similar to Rob's, just about the, the type of infrastructure you wrote on and whether you think that's adequate for Eugene, but I think you got that with Rob's question.
I have a question about e-bikes. E-bikes are very popular everywhere.
Yes.
And I was wondering if you saw kind of if you could compare contrast between how e-bikes are showing up here in the States versus over there.
I don't know if I know enough about e-bikes or them being there, but one thing that was really, really cool to me to see, and we kind of will see this a little bit here, I think, was there was like a group of older people who were hanging out together who might not be able to bike as far on standard bikes, and they all got together on their e-bikes and were like zooming past us in like a group hanging out together. And I was really jealous for a moment on my like really heavy Dutch bike going really slowly. But it was fantastic that they had that as a range extender to be able to get out of the city into the countryside and then wherever else they wanted to go. So I think that might be pretty similar to here, but I'm not necessarily sure.
Anyone else? Well, thank you so much, Melissa. That was
Yes.
it was really good.
I've had that moment too.
Okay, the next thing on our agenda is sort of a follow-up to this, because a number of you were present when we had the Dutch planners here in town for a few days. And so this is a kind of a debrief and discussion follow-up to that. And it says it's both the ATC chairs and the transportation staff. So, Merit, you want to lead us off?
No, thanks. Let's let Willow.
Okay. You can lead us off. Real quick, who in the room and online was able to like participate or attend any of the Think Bike stuff? Okay, nice. So we've got a good number of people. There were a few different ways that folks could have attended, but I think this is just an opportunity for us to reflect on that experience or any key takeaways that we had and hear from you all. And then I think Rob, me and Shane could also just express to you what we got out of it and where us as staff are thinking about, you know, moving forward with those ideas. But maybe we can start with thoughts and opinions from ATC and then we can share a little bit as well. And I think Mary has her hand raised.
Am I on? Well, I'm on board now. I couldn't remember what we were doing, so now I'm on board. And we really wanted to make sure that we said, wow, what a great event this was. And, you know, like top-notch international, you know, folks coming to Eugene. And, you know, the fact that the city staff went, I don't know what it was like for them to have to, you know, to go after it and to pay for it and to arrange it and everything, and to devote so much time and resources. And I think it was an extraordinary event. And I think it will make a difference in how we proceed. And so I just wanted to say thank you very much to the city staff and for everybody who organized it and for including us so much in it. We had an opportunity to participate and it was really great. So I just think it was just an excellent event overall. Thank you very much.
I agree. Thank you. It was very helpful. I guess one thing that I was struck by was I hadn't realized that apparently in the Netherlands, they had very much a car culture as ours up through about the 1970s, which is not that long ago. And they have made a total transformation and they're not as wealthy a country as we are. And they have totally turned things around in just a few decades. And so it was impressive to hear that fact. And then to see how quickly they made all these changes. That's, I guess that's the one thing that I look at. It's like, we put in some great facilities, but we spend so long on each one. It's like, how can we get the system-wide changes that they have accomplished so quickly? And it was very impressive though to hear it, and to hear that they're not, you know, they're not pro-bike, anti-car by any means, you know. They're just, let's get people around where they need to go, and people will make rational choices. Yeah, John?
I'll go. Yeah, so one thing I was really struck by their approach was the way they tried to make things as consistent as possible, so that the infrastructure sort of told you what kind of street you were on. And so it was very clear that you've reached a street where bikes and pedestrians are they're the ones who should be using the street. You in a car are a guest. And I feel like in the United States, we've done a little bit in Eugene, but not consistently enough, where you get a sense that, okay, this is a street where I really should slow down. And that was one of the things that one of the groups worked on. And so it'll be really interesting to see what comes from that.
So one of the things that I saw that was really different was they have a density that we just don't have and we will never have because of the way that we approach land use planning from the very beginning of time when white people came here. So we have a very different situation. So I don't know that it can be completely analogous to what you're seeing there. But the other takeaway that I had was that we tend to try to do things almost perfectly, you know, and do very few of them rather than just put in some plastic things and bolt them to the street and just make it so much cheaper and much quicker and make a lot of change really quickly. The other thing that you've mentioned too was the consistency. You know, I've really been noticing that green paint. I've really got a thing about the green paint. And I know that it's, you know, I know that it's a maintenance issue and it's expensive, but it's still cheaper than a whole engineering project. And I just think about, say, the Alder Street Greenway, you get to 24th and it's like this horrible jog. And some people stop for you because there's a pedestrian crosswalk there. And it's just a nightmare. And it's like, what if we just painted that whole intersection green stripes and had done with it? And then people might, you know, kind of get that this is a lot of bikes come through there. That I think sometimes we just try to overthink it and just do the perfect thing rather than a good thing. And the other takeaway I had was that because we're such a spread out city and we have, you know, with good reason, a desire for equity throughout the city, but that means we get a little project here, a little project here, and a little project there. What if we took one neighborhood and made it absolutely wonderfully bike friendly so that all the other neighborhoods went, how come they get it? And then, you know, you get a much greater push if you make one neighborhood and show this is what it could be like. This is what it would be like if every every street in this neighborhood had bump outs. If the cars were really slowed down. Of course, I'm very precious because they ripped through Harris Street at 40 miles an hour. So I'd love to see my neighborhood as the test. So that was my takeaway. And it was great having, it was very inspiring. Though I think Portia was probably as inspiring as they were.
Yeah.
I was ignorant of the history, I guess, and I just had always heard of it described as, oh, it's a cycling paradise. But the was it the Kindermoor?
The Kindermoor was really lovely. That
Which
was like,
I couldn't help but
Direct.
connect that to Vision Zero. And but seeing the differences in one, just the name, Vision Zero is inspiring.
Dead Children is really good though.
But it doesn't have quite the punch you in the face of Dead Children. And just the way then that they went about some of their activism and the direct action of those movements, I was, oh my gosh, these people are so hardcore. I had no idea
that they had fought so hard to get where they are now.
I'll just say something related to that too, in that, I did know that history part, but what I didn't recognize before was what they also talked about was that, yeah, of course we faced opposition. And like, that not only did they do this change, but they faced a lot of opposition in that transition, and that, their first bikeway that they installed at, I forget which city that was in, where the business owners like contracted to have it ripped out in the middle of the night, and like the alderman had to go out and like stop them from tearing it up, And so there was this real battle of like, this is our vision, this is where we're going, and people who didn't agree with it and still pushing forward with, this is how we have to keep moving ahead. And that was a real fight for, not only the activists, but for the leaderships, and staff in the cities to like say, this is where we have to go, and we're gonna keep going. And I'm sorry that this seems like it isn't advantageous to you, but in the long run, it will be. And like they talked about, specific streets that, they showed those old clips of shoppers saying, I'm never gonna shop here again. And then, the present day of like all the shoppers walking on these streets that are just, commercial centers. And, as opposed to people jockeying to try and find the few parking spots that are there. And just what a difference that was. And I think that was a big takeaway too for me, just as a staff person. Like, okay, yes, of course there was opposition, and how did they work through that, and that they still faced. That was the other interesting thing.
That's what I thought, was that they
Yeah.
still, every
Even
time,
with-
it's just the same, every time, it's like, no. Incredible.
It looks like maybe Andrew, did you have your hand raised?
Oh, I was just gonna say what Julie just said, which is because I was actually on the same trip as Clarissa, and in both Denmark and in the Netherlands, all of the planners talked about like there's still the same opposition. Like every day in Copenhagen, I rode on this bike lane that made absolutely perfect sense. And there was a bike lane on the other side of these lakes in the middle of the city. And people were like, why do we need two bike lanes? Even in Copenhagen. And a couple of years ago, they put the bike lanes in, and the planners talked about how people were just losing their minds, in 2018 in Copenhagen, right? Like people are still just like losing their minds over putting a bike lane. And when you ride it, you're like, oh, this makes perfect sense. Why would I cross a bridge and go on the other side of a lake to go this way? And so it's still very real over there, which is like encouraging, but also frightening.
It doesn't get easier.
Well, in the chat, Andrea brings up a good point. One of the speakers described it several times. It's like, okay, they were gonna take out a lane of traffic on a street, and people were all up in arms. But then when they said, but we can still give you some parking right in front of your house, I said, oh, okay, then I'm all right with it. So the parking spaces was actually more important to them than actually being able to drive down the street.
Well, that's a big deal, and it has a thing about the density, because houses do not have garages in Europe. They don't exist. People have to, you have to buy a garage, you have to rent a garage. It doesn't come with your house in most neighborhoods.
Different households
But a
don't
lot
have
of
three
them are,
cars either.
a lot of them in Copenhagen were underground, so the area above would be like a public space, a plaza. So one of the pictures that I had was gonna show, but I didn't end up doing, just had like a playground and parks and areas for kids, so they don't lose that land space for cars. They're putting them all underground. So I thought that was another part. Interesting.
One thing too, Julie, those countries are super urban, but they're also super rural. And so I have a whole collection of photos from being on the trip of like, I'm in suburban Denmark outside of, a big box store, and there's still, bike infrastructure. And I'm like the equivalent of 10 miles outside of Cottage Grove on a farm road, but the speed limit changed because the road did something, and they have speed bumps. Like, why? I mean, there couldn't have been more than like 8 cars a day driving down this road, but that doesn't matter because the road is engineered so that the 8 cars a day go the speed limit. And so, even in rural areas, they have this stuff.
So I guess I'd be interested in hearing, and well, obviously, if there are any more members who want to chime in, but I'd be interested in hearing from staff. It's like, so what do you expect to do with this insight, these insights we got, and how can we look for things to be different from what was learned?
Don't look at me.
Yes, right.
So we had two sort of breakout groups. One was focused more on sort of the transit connection. And I think it was a little more theoretical, some of what we talked about. And then there was another group that Willow, I think, might have been part of. No, Willow, you were kind of just rotating around. Willow was making sure the whole event actually happened. So the other group was more focused on infrastructure, looking at how do we design Oakway Road, because we have funding to build a protected bikeway there. And then also sort of like, what's our toolkit for our neighborhood greenways? And so I think there's more potential, more actionable stuff from that group than from our, I mean, our group, one of the things we talked about was how can we make it so downtown, like this, like we have a, like the idea of developing a car plan, like Clarissa, is it, or Clarissa? Clarissa was saying, having a car plan, so whereas we just allow, like, pretty much all streets, we allow people to drive. I mean, we have exceptions like Alder Street where the diverters are, right, and there's other places like that. But to a great extent, we're very permeable. So it's like, one of the ideas we talked about was making it so Willamette isn't just this through street for the downtown. I believe, though, that that's a really politically sensitive issue, and that we need to be really careful how we, right? If you want to, you know, having that come from the community, great. But I think that I think we need to be careful how we, given how tenuous downtown is. There, you know, I think we just need to be careful about how do we pitch that idea, and I think maybe part of it starts with like trying to get an understanding of like what are the existing conditions right now. Personally, I feel like, yeah, there's a lot of traffic on the Rickety Plaza area. Sometimes it's not that pleasant, but we need a build of more of a shared understanding and agreement of that, I think, before we talk about making it harder to drive through downtown. That's my opinion. So, but I do think the toolkit that the other group, and I don't know, maybe we could have Reed and Catherine come in and talk about some of their takeaways from that group, because I think, I don't know, Shane, if you heard much from what that group came up with, or you have other observations.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what was interesting to me of the three different groups that worked on the three different pieces is that there is work that is continuing on, like the design for the Oakway Road and the Coburg intersection is something that was already going to happen, but I think we got some really great insights into specifics. And then the neighborhood greenway piece, which was already a part of our transportation system plan, and like this need to improve what our neighborhood greenways are and sort of how they fit into our bike network. That was already part of the TSP, but I think having these professionals here really helped hone a little bit of what are the things we need to do to make them better, and just creating a toolkit was definitely a part of that, of having, you know, a real guide. We have a street design guide.
Yeah, complete street design standards.
Yeah, complete street design standards. But it has, you know, 2 pages on neighborhood greenways of generally how they look, but we don't have a full toolkit of what things we might apply and where. And so I think that work is continuing, and so I think that these presentations and these workshops help to sort of move that forward a little bit. And then for our third group, the one that was talking about connecting transit with bikes, we started out talking about the downtown station. We even looked at the Santa Clara station and sort of how we better connect people and people on bikes to transit. And what we ended up talking about was sort of the gateway connections to the transit center and the downtown station. And we talked about 10th and Olive, and then we talked about Willamette Street. And, you know, 10th and Olive is something that we've been talking about for downtown development, of how do we improve this area that has LCC and the library and the downtown station. But there's not really a way, sort of this flow in and out of there, and sort of looking at it as an architectural and sort of placemaking piece was something that we worked on it as a group. But through that, we started to talk about what connects to the downtown station and thinking about Fifth Avenue and the development that's there, Riverfront Plaza, Holt Center, Amtrak, and sort of where, you know, the farmers market and Saturday market, Park Blocks area, really how Willamette feeds into the downtown station. And so really to make first improvements to that downtown station connection for people, we need to improve that Willamette Street connection and sort of to go up as far as 13th to connect it to the two-way protected bikeway. So really that corridor of 13th to 5th on Willamette really is the piece. And then sort of to Rob's point of the permeability for people driving, you have lots of ways that people drive downtown and lots of options, and Oak and Pearl are sort of our main streets for that connection. And so it used to be that we pushed everyone onto Oak for that north bound travel. But now that we've two-way Willamette, we're seeing a lot more cars coming into downtown. And so we've already made changes, right? Without, you know, a car plan. And so what can we do to actually make that car plan to make it so that we have a better pedestrian bike space? So I think there was a lot of really exciting, interesting things that not only we as staff got to participate in, but that having the community, you know, be able to hear it and be a part of that conversation too was, I think, really helpful, inspiring.
Yeah, Connie?
This is for Clarissa and also you. I don't know if you were able to interact with any of the university programs, either in engineering or in planning. And now that they've had 40 years of working on this, if that's become an integral part of their curriculum, either in planning or in engineering, of designing for this. And I wondered if some of them, you all got a chance to talk to the professional about the type of curriculum and focus they encounter maybe in their professional career and in their training, that, you know, having hopefully had 40 years to build a curriculum that was more oriented toward this.
I didn't really talk to people about that as much now.
I think a question for Rebecca Lewis, because she was a visiting professor in Malmö, Sweden, which is also a very big part of the city.
Right.
Yeah, I can chime in. I talked to some people about like their design guidelines and how they do engineering, and so I think it probably has fed into their curriculum. Because I think one thing I identified just generally in the Netherlands and Denmark was kind of the one-off nature of a lot of their infrastructure. It is modular, but it like every intersection's kind of one-off, and here things in a different way seem really standardized. And so we have a lot of like rules like the MUTCD, and our engineers have a lot more liability. I talked to actually some Americans who work there now, and they said basically engineers in the United States have a lot more liability, and so they're not as willing to get away from like these standards books. And so that's why like at intersections in Denmark and in the Netherlands, you would often see like the same kinds of things, but used really differently. And I know we've run into that in Eugene here with like the way that we do bike signals, right? There are rules about if you put a bike signal up, then a whole bunch of things apply to that. And so I think one of the big differences that I heard was just their engineering philosophies. Like they have a manual, it's called the Crow manual, but you don't have to follow it. It's like a light suggestion.
And they did a lot of pilot projects and then data studies. So they do data studies before an intersection. They would test it out with a small pilot project that could go in for a year and then come out. And then they would run tests at the end of it to see, okay, how are people using this intersection now? And if it went well, they could scale that up into different parts of the neighborhood. And so some things they tried and they took them out. They were like, that did not work at all. But then they were able to learn and build on things that did work.
Yeah, I would just point out it in terms of the education people are getting too, that I know right after their visit, Mark Schlossberg did sort of a mock-up of a couple intersections on Alder Street that would make it really into a greenway by really narrowing it down and making it feel like cars were a guest there rather than it's a car street that a lot of bikes use. Mary, I think your hand is up. Sorry,
Yes.
Dr. Judy, go ahead.
I had a couple takeaways that came back to me. One was related to what other people are saying. I think that it sounds like they spend a whole lot more time, put more resources into research, and I think they have more sort of entities to do that. Maybe even outside of city staff, they employ people. I know we do that to some degree. I don't know if we do it anywhere near what they do, and it makes me wonder if that might be something we can look at is doing more analysis and research like Clarissa was just talking about. And then the other thing was, is it SARS? Is that one of the presenters? The one,
Sure.
okay, that person, he said that they really spend more time planning for cars than they do for walk and bike, because this is what I heard him say, because if they can get the cars really doing good things, then it works then they have more time to put into bikes and walking. Anyway, I don't know if I said that right, but he said he spends a lot of time on cars, and I'm really interested in that car network that they have. And I know I heard Rob and Shane both, refer to this, like, how can we divert cars? And I think this is good. And I'm wondering if after, you don't have to answer this right now, it might be a whole separate topic, but after this, if you're thinking, oh, as we go into different projects, we need to see if we can divert cars, and here's this project and here's this project, because we spend so much of our resources trying to get cars and bikes and walkers to coexist rather than have networks. Or I'm wondering if they would say it would be a good idea, or if they did, or if we should sit down and say, here's our car network. This is actually our big car network that we're now going to decide to have everything go around, instead of have it be a piecemeal thing. Do we need to design a car network? And so I'd be curious to have city staff respond to that at some point.
Well, I guess I'll just say really quickly, and Rob can maybe say more about this, but in a way we do, but I don't think it's not up to date, and I don't think it's to the standards that we necessarily want it to be, because it's an older classification, but we have our street classification system. And so, neighborhood, street, or local street, neighborhood collector, I can't recall it, but up to arterial.
Major,
So,
minor, and
minor collector, major collector. And so we have that collector, network laid out. But like, what's interesting is if you look at that, like Willamette Street, once you get to 13th, it's a local street. Like, it's not made to be. And so there are places where that, we could apply that more, but I think it would also be worth reevaluating some of that. And I noticed Anne Brown also has.
yeah, I was gonna say, we're pretty much at time, but I do want to hear what Anne has to say.
Oh, thanks. So I have, one plug and then one question. So the plug is related to the research side. So we at the U of O have been talking to city staff, and so hopefully we'll be presenting at the end of the year, so end of the school year, not calendar year, we're planning to do a sidewalk inventory. So that's directly from the ATC. So looking at really the quality of sidewalks. So we've talked a lot about like where are the broken sidewalks, and we don't know. So that's what we are going to be harnessing an army of students. Currently we have 42 students interested in these projects. So I'm super jazzed. I'm glad it's Clarissa. I just sent you an email about joining these. And the other one is about the neighborhood greenways. So trying to reimagine those and providing some tools. So really thinking about bringing data and hopefully help push these all forward, and providing some more support for staff. So that's my plug. And my question was, so I was thinking a lot about your comments, all of your comments about thinking about the pushback that people still give in Copenhagen and et cetera, when new projects go in. And it made me think about here in Eugene, and I'm curious if either this was discussed during the study abroad or during the Think Bike, which is how different stakeholders engage in the process. And I'm thinking a lot about like businesses in downtown Eugene, for example, and on-street parking. And if there was any discussion in the either Think Bike or the study abroad about how and if businesses are a stakeholder that the planners over there engage with, and if they have a sway in the process. Because my impression is here that they are a loud group. Maybe that's wrong.
Like on the
I
last
can
one.
respond. I had a conversation with Connie Juleson, I think, and it was really interesting because we were talking about, so how do you get this all passed so quickly? Like, how do you have like these stakeholder meetings? And she said, oh, Well, we'll make a design. We'll go talk to the neighborhood that it's going directly in. We'll hear what they have to say. We might change our design and then we'll put it in. So it was way less involved than what we have, and that really streamlined their process and allowed them to pursue what they feel the city needs. I think there are benefits and not negatives to that, but it was definitely a lot faster of a process.
Okay, we're pretty much at time on this, but I thank you all for your thoughts, and there's lots of food for thought for the future too, so thank you very much. Okay, the next thing on the agenda is bike and pedestrian detours, so I don't know who's.
Yeah, I'm planning to leave that. I'm kind of standing in for Reed.
Okay.
But he gave me lots of information. I did send a document out to the ATC. I don't know if you had time to review it, but it was in that initial email. And I titled it Walking and Biking Detours Process for ATC. So essentially, I had a meeting with Reed and we wrote out how the walking and biking detours happen in Eugene. And I can just run through it. I'll just try and keep it like super brief for you all, if that seems helpful, just to tell you how it happens. And then basically we can just have a discussion and I can take some notes on feedback that you may have and we can go from there. But so there's kind of two buckets. There's city projects that the city is doing, and then there's non-city projects. So this would be projects that say eWeb is doing, or that is happening on a private street or something like that. So with the city projects, they go through this like 30, 60, 90% process of design. And that 90%, they generally include a traffic control plan. Not always, but most of the time they have a traffic control plan at that 90%, which means that our team has a chance to review it. And what happens is Reed and Catherine, our planners, will look at that and be like, oh, this detour needs to adjust or something needs to happen here, and create the detour plan for people walking and people biking. Now, construction sites don't always follow their traffic control plan as they should, or something is missing to begin with. And so the city tries to catch the issues at 90%, but there are a lot of projects to track and sometimes things get missed, as you probably all have experienced out in the city when maybe a detour is not quite right. So on the document that I sent you all, there's kind of a 5-step process that you can go through to alert us if there is a detour issue. There's a city's current projects map, so you can just go to the current projects, click the shape of the project that you're worried about, that there's a detour issue, and then you can find the project manager and call or email them and be like, there's an issue with the detour here. And that's like the quickest way. You can also call the Public Works Engineering line, which there's a phone number on the document I sent everyone. That's pretty easy. You can just be like, hey, I'm here at the corner of this and this, and the detour, I can't get through, or it doesn't seem like it was planned for. So that's the process for city projects. The non-city projects are pretty different because there's a variety of permits issued. The city doesn't necessarily have control over them. Places like eWeb, for example, are allowed to do projects with no traffic control plan or permit from the city. So in the past, the transportation planning team has tried to formalize a set of temporary pedestrian and bicycle access routes citywide, but that project kind of didn't really get much support, and so it didn't go through. Public Works and Engineering, the city is using those standards, but it didn't make it into the rest of the organization. So good news is, because of the requests and me and Reed having this meeting and setting up this document, Reed has actually recently set up a meeting with the city's principal engineer and the projects team, and PEPI, which stands for Privately Engineered Public Improvements manager. So 3 big people that he's going to talk to about kind of restarting that process, about getting appropriate access routes and standards and review processes set. And that meeting, he said, will occur in November. So we'll have hopefully some stuff to bring back to you all about that. So hopefully that wasn't too long or confusing, and we can kind of open it up if people have thoughts.
Yeah, and I think we're sort of anticipating that this will be an ongoing discussion. I don't think we're going to finish it in this meeting, and just to give you some kind of real sense for what are we talking about, there have been 3 detours in the kind of recent past that have been quite problematic. One of them is the one down by where they're building a new YMCA by Roosevelt High School, and it's quite a zoo if you go down there. Another one is on Pearl Street between the Fifth Street Market and that alley across the street there, you know, there was initially no detour indicated. And even then, even with it open, it's a detour that many people are not taking. Yeah, it's quite a ways out of your way. And then another one that was several months ago was when they were repaving 17. And there for several consecutive streets across, you just get up there and all of a sudden it drops off by 1.5 feet and it says road closed. You know, with no indication of where you're supposed to go. And especially if you were walking, you would walk all the way up there a full block, find out, oh, I can't get through here. So you go over, walk another block, go up another, can't get through here either. And it's like, get real. I mean, so these are the kinds of things that have brought this topic to mind. So any reaction, thoughts, comments?
I had a question. In your document that you sent out, you said it didn't get much support. From whom? What are you talking about there? I mean, where, who do we complain to? I mean, how do you know, what support do you, I mean, basically I'm saying, so you need, you know, you need citizen support, but where's the opposition? You know, where is that opposition coming from? Or where is that disinterest? I should say, maybe opposition is too strong a word. Where is that disinterest coming from?
I'm not sure if I have the answer to that question.
I bet you guys do.
I don't.
Which project would you talking about?
Just in general,
Any
like,
project.
I think that the work that Reed was doing, where we got so far with TPARs, with traffic, with the temporary pedestrian access and traffic control plans, that it was sort of agreed that Public Works, you know, we would put those in for our projects and really create better.
So 17, we dropped the ball, so that was our project, and we needed to do better. I mean, those are the ones we have the most control over. And like we've talked about this multiple times, like we need to do a good job on our projects that we have full control over. And so we, you know, I think we will get, you know, and Catherine too will be meeting with our engineers and talking about that. And you know, we shouldn't have things like 17. So that's number one. Number two, like you named 3 projects and they're all permitted by different parts of the city. So 17th is the city capital project. YMCA is permitted by the Planning and Development Department. It used to be actually part of engineering. It was called PIC Engineering. Now they were brought over to Building and Permit Services, that work group. And then the Pearl Street one is what we call privately engineered public improvement, or a PEPI. So where we're permitting a private entity to do work in the right of way. So there's just like, so there's a whole bunch of people in the city that we need to bring together and get them on board, and then they each have their own process. So, but I think, you know, Reed and I agree, like we need to make sure we're at least doing a good job on our projects. And then, you know, I think something we should probably talk about is just the scale of the impact. You know, like some projects are really small and maybe they're not, you know, something like the YMCA, that's a big project. Maybe that should have more scrutiny internally. I mean, I'll just say like another thing that I feel like we should be talking about is the duration of the project too. So like, I can see that they need to close the sidewalk on the 24th there. I mean, they're big structure, but do they need to close it for 2 years? You know, like, how can we pressure the construction folks to say, okay, we're gonna let you close it, but why don't you really prove to us that you need it for the 2 years you're asking for? Can we scale that back to a year? So I'd like for that to be a part of the discussion too. Like, I remember there was a sidewalk closed on Patterson Street, like 14th for like a year for like a little apartment building. And I'm like, for half the time, they weren't even doing any work. I'm like, what the heck? Why are we allowing this? So sorry, I'm as frustrated as you guys are. So yeah, so what we're gonna do is, Reed, I see as like our subject matter expert, but I think the process isn't necessarily his strong point. So Catherine is gonna work, hopefully she's gotta reach out to her, a woman named Lacey Johnson, who does a lot of equity and like ADA work for engineering. So I'm hoping that they're gonna work together to lead a process. And then Reed and Katie, who's our principal engineer, who are better, I think, on the subject matter side, can kind of lead that, but then we'll have other staff who are kind of leading the process. We've been this is cycled through. I mean, Alan probably remembers when Anya worked up, she created a flyer for us, like a year ago. So we've been talking about this for probably
When I was on the DPAC.
So hopefully we can get it right.
And really to kind of answer your question, I think there wasn't like opposition. I think there was lack of support, and those are kind of two different.
Right, yeah, I get that. It was
Yeah.
disinterest. It's just like,
Yeah.
this is not that
And it's like
interesting,
the decentralized nature of it. I think
Right.
people were kind of like, and it was just hard to get it like boosted into
Right.
the forefront. And I think that's like what Rob is saying. That's where slightly increased staff and having a new planner on board, will hopefully like we can keep pushing that. So,
But I mean, it does seem that with projects that want, have duration and its location too. I mean, it's location. It's when you have a project that, the ones that have been described, I mean, they're really high impact on the community. And it's, they're just huge. And it seems like there's somebody is responsible in each of those projects. There is a person, I don't know who it is it the chief engineer, is it the architect, whatever, but somebody is responsible. And the question I want to ask them is, would you like your 8-year-old to walk through this detour plan? Would you let your grandmother on a walker walk through this plan? And that's the question, and they have to answer in writing.
So one, just real quick, is like when that 959, I think it's called Franklin, the apartment building was built,
Yeah.
we actually made them build a temporary sidewalk.
Yes, that's really, I mean, you see that all
That
the
was one of
time
the
in
best-
cities.
Yeah,
You see, they bumped it out into the street. It
Yeah.
slows down traffic.
well, the Elkhorn
It's
was,
so great.
the Elkhorn, just to be called Junior, which is right near there, when they were built, we actually made them put a scaffold up, like you'd see in a bigger city, and have the sidewalk underneath. But
Oh, well,
Well,
Andrew
actually,
on the
Andrew
internet
had his
had
hand
his
up
hand up.
first, yeah, Andrew.
Well, I was just gonna answer your question, Rob. You asked how do we address this? In a lot of major cities, you actually have to pay per day that the sidewalk is closed. I'm not suggesting that we drastically raise the cost of development, Eugene. There are reasons to not, but right, like they have no incentive to do things that would get the sidewalk open faster. Whereas some major cities where this is a problem, or they're setting up an incentive structure for developers to do things like developers need to close sidewalks. That's fine. It happens. But like they 2 years is a long to like, are they how many days are they actually operating in that space? The other thing I was gonna say was just around some of this stuff. Julie, you kind of touched on it, but I think most of the time, at least on the bikeways, we don't have that many bikeways in the city. And so like, asking developers to do something on, our major bikeway network is different than on every random street that they work on. And so, I mean, I would just encourage the city to keep exploring policy because like, I guess the analogy is like detouring 2 blocks from Pearl to Willamette doesn't sound that bad, except when you ride that 2 blocks down there and then come back and then have to go down Willamette and then back over to Pearl. And, like, I don't think we would accept it if developers could close a street and like ask you to drive, hey, sorry, we're working on 13th on the bike lane. You have to drive all the way down to 18th. Like people wouldn't accept that. And so I just think applying the same kind of standards and lenses to at least the major bike network, if not any street with a bike lane, would be really appropriate.
Yeah, so maybe one answer, Julie, is we also struggle with this on campus with detours and having a decentralized institution with multiple project managers and things like that. We've got an OSHA person on campus who, when there is a safety concern, I contact, and she does a great job cutting through all of the sort of stuff that goes on. I don't know if something like that exists at the city. I don't know who's paying attention to liability for the city when a little kid wanders through a detour where they could trip and fall and hurt themselves. But maybe that might be the person to loop in on this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that, the situation at the Y is crazy. As I was coming home, riding home today, a child, I mean, he couldn't be more than 12. It's 4:30, school's out for a while. Obviously, he had a class after. He's walking in the bike lane and he came to the corner, because there's nobody there to stop him now, but the crossing guards are all gone. Came to the corner and then he can't walk. They've left, there's like so he's got 1 foot in the street and 1 foot on the tiny bit of sidewalk that's left all through that area because he's 12. He doesn't want to have to cross the road and drive his way. And it's like, hey.
Okay, we're sort of out of time here. So I just wanted to throw in one idea that was actually Julie's idea was that, I mean, how about just rather than Reed and Catherine having to go all over town trying to check on all these permits, how about if every time there is a sign that says detour or road closed or whatever, you say unhappy or have problems, call this number, and it's usually somebody on site. You know, and if it's not their problem, if it's actually the owner, the contractor's problem, then they can pass it along, but just, you know, so you don't have to go on your website and find the right little polygon and, you know,
Yeah,
and
it's
look up
so
the,
difficult.
just got issues, call this number. I mean, that would seem like it would put it back in our hands. Just a thought.
Once we permit it, they're following the rules, you know, like if they're not, sometimes they make mistakes, sometimes they mess up and they're not doing properly, like the traffic control that they're supposed to be doing, that way it happens. But there's a policy issue here that we need to solve, where we're just not allowing as many of these detours or changing the duration of that sort of thing, you know what I mean?
Like the YMCA one, for example, meets the
Yeah,
standards.
right.
So like you could call and be like, this is terrible, and they're like, yes, but it meets the standards, so we're not gonna do anything.
Well, still, if they get calls day after day after day after day, they might very well decide, you know, yeah, it meets the standards, but people hate us. Let's do something
I mean,
different.
I don't call the why. Honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Thanks for your thoughts, everyone.
okay, so yeah, this will, I'm suspecting will be an ongoing discussion. Okay, so the next thing is Franklin Boulevard.
Hey, can you pull up let's do that video first.
Do you wanna watch the video first?
Sure.
Okay.
So before I went, actually, I need to. There's one that's like a minute. It's long.
That makes us
Right
look
there,
better.
right there. Look, I'm gonna show you a video. This is from a city called Gothenburg in Sweden, which is all they call Göteborg. And I was there before I met up with Rebecca Lewis's class in 2019. We took a family trip to Sweden. And it's just coincidentally, our neighborhood had roundabouts in it. In fact, this roundabout has a bus lane, BRT going through the middle, so it's kind of interesting. So is it working?
Yeah.
And similar in that some to what we're proposing for Franklin, like some parts have only one vehicle lane, but some have two. And then there's protected bike lanes and they're raised, which is what we're proposing as well.
Yikes,
And
I'm scared already.
They just go.
Expectation that the people will stop.
the drivers were really good about, I did not see any situation where a driver did not stop. They're Swedish drivers on the, but they were being very patient and you can see the bikes keep coming and coming.
Do they back up into the roundabout there?
I don't remember. Yeah, I guess so, a little bit.
Mhm.
That may be the,
Oh, if there was more than one.
you can see the bus lane kind of going through the middle there. I have another video that shows that, but that's not what we're proposing for. And then you can see how the bike and the crosswalk are kind of side by side.
This doesn't feel any more dangerous than some intersections in Eugene.
The cars are going way slow.
Yeah,
Well, and
it's,
the bikes are being pretty, let's see.
yeah, the bikes
They're
are
going
bold.
on the
Yeah.
expectation that these cars are gonna stop.
Mhm.
That's it.
And very few people are waiting. Like,
This is-
like
so-
for just a few seconds maybe, but like, no one's waiting at a light for 45
Yeah, as long as they-
seconds.
Right, so like if you're, right now, if you get to a traffic light, can you pull up that image? I emailed you a revised version.
Yeah, yeah.
So right now, like, yeah, if you're biking and you get to a traffic light, you could be having to wait a couple minutes, right, just to get. And then if you have to get one way and then across, right, that's another minute or two.
So this is the whole thing. It's kind of.
Yeah, can
small.
you zoom in and we'll just like
Do you want
walk,
me to walk like east to west or west? to east?
why don't we start down here? So I guess that's west to east. And but let me just tell you like a couple of higher level things. So this is still a work in progress. And so you're taking notes, Shane, I take it, because I've seen typing.
Yeah.
So I appreciate, any input you guys share tonight. It's not set in stone. We're finishing up the design, the conceptual design work. We're working on what's called the NEPA, which is like for federal funded projects that you have to do look at all the different kinds of potential impacts. One of the things you may have heard in before with projects that have NEPA is that one thing that's really important is just sort of the footprint, getting that down, but that's the impact, kind of like, property owners or wetlands, but within that, there's more flexibility to change things even as you go into like actual engineering work. In this corridor, right as it is now, there's a couple of things. Right now in Franklin, there's sections. Mostly it's either 3 vehicles or lanes in each direction or 2, depending on the section you're in. But for the most part, we're changing it so it'll be continuously 2 lanes for motor vehicles in each direction. We also have a goal of having 1 MX lane in each direction, whereas right now it's mostly a bidirectional lane, although there's some sections where there's one short section where there is MX lanes going both ways. The other thing is that there are sections here where you're going to see shared use paths, and there's sections where we have protected bike lanes. The protected bike lanes are all just one-way protected bike lanes. I would say that's not set in stone. Honestly, like, I don't have a good explanation for why we're doing it that, but here's what the thing, and like, one of the things that we didn't talk about tonight when we were talking about Europe is, like, in the United States, we have a lot of driveways. And like, it's probably, you know, having a shared use path with the driveway, you want drivers to be expecting bike riders if they're coming out of a driveway. And so a protected bike lane might make more sense when there's more driveways. And so I would say that in general, we'll probably have more protected bike lanes in the section here where there's driveways, and then in the sections where there's like more continuous lack of driveways, it's more shared use paths. Also, sometimes we just don't have a lot of width. And so in those cases, that's where you're more likely to see a shared use path too, because we didn't have enough width to have a protected bike lane and a good sidewalk. Another thing too is, like, one of the trade-offs is how wide is the walking and biking space, and then how wide is the buffer? And then can you make the buffer wide enough to have street trees? Because those create, you know, a lot of, I mean, there's a lot of benefits to them. I don't need to go into. So this is Alder Street here. And so what we're showing is shared use path on this section. This is what used to be the Phoenix Inn. That's now a dorm for Bushnell University. And then we can kind of drag it to the right more and then kind of up a little bit. So you can see it just continues. This is that pedestrian signal that was put in by the developers of the apartment building I was talking about earlier. And right now, you know, there's this path that goes along on the university property near like the mill race ponds. It's like 7 feet wide. It would probably be good to widen it. But you know, we'll have to talk about priorities at some point. And then that comes up to the street. I try to get the developers there to help do like a cost share with us on building the path, and they agreed to do the signal, which they mostly paid for that, but they didn't want to do the path. So, but this, you know, right now it's 3 lanes that come in right after 11, so we would take that down to 2. And right now, after you get past the mill race, you know, there's no sidewalk on the south side, so we would have a shared use path there. And then on the north side, this would continue as a shared use path to Onyx, and then here,
That's all right, nice, isn't it?
It's better than it looks, because 2 of those are bus lanes.
right, so these are right now, there's only 1 bus lane coming through here.
I
When we
see.
added 2, our traffic modeling showed that we need, you know, just in terms of like, for the street to function, that we need to have the 2 left turn lanes here. Like, we looked at that, we were like, do we really need 2 lanes? Our very progressive consulting traffic engineer was like, yeah, we need 2 lanes here. And I mean, I should probably talk with them some more about that, but that's, and then here you can see that there's 2 lanes currently going eastbound in here. We took that down to 1. That's partially what created more room for that, for the having a, and now that, you know, there's no sidewalk here right now, right? It's pretty awful. There's that wall. The university should build a sidewalk, right? Property owners are responsible for building sidewalks.
Yeah,
You
just
see,
make
right?
it though.
So anyway, so it's a little tight in here. There's no buffer shown for the walking and biking facility. You know, our goal is to try to get the street so that it's a much lower speed street than it is now. You know, it's 35 miles an hour now, trying to get it. I mean, actually, I used to live in Lower Hill Valley. I would drive on that street all the time. I actually think it is a 35-mile-an-hour street. I don't think until you get past Walnut, I think because you have a median here and it's more tight, I actually feel like it is a pretty good, like, people don't speed on a huge amount, maybe like after hours they do when it's like more open, because there's traffic congestion, and we're gonna have, this is not gonna be like a freak, I mean, you're not gonna be able to zoom through here as a driver. I mean, there's a lot of people who be sprinkling. So anyway, you can see the 2 MX lanes. You know, LTD says they need 28 feet. That's what we're showing here. I want to talk with, I don't see Andrew up there right now, but I want to talk with them a little more about, you know, do they really need 28 feet? So that's, you know, that's something we'll be looking at, because I'd love to get a little more buffer here. I think we can probably get them down to like 24. And then we come to our first roundabout. This is Onyx Street.
Yes.
So one of the things that our traffic engineer is recommending, and when I say our traffic engineer, just remember, I'm talking about our consultant, is that even if we have a shared use path coming in, he's recommending that we segregate the bikes and peds go through the raised crosswalk. And as you maybe saw, I don't know if we saw any images from Europe, but in Europe, they'll have like shark's teeth to indicate to drivers that you need to yield. So we need to look at like, what tools do we use to get drivers, so drivers will yield, but one of them is raising the crosswalk so that they have to slow down. Another thing is in the United States, for the most part, you're required to have what's called a rectangular rapid flashing beacon, where you know, what we call stutter flash to in Eugene, where you push at multi-lane roundabouts. It's particularly for people with vision impairment. So, I mean, I have kind of mixed feelings about whether we really need that, because like a downside to it is if, you know, drivers, are they not going to stop if someone hasn't pushed the button and activated it? So that, you know, and then for bike riders, so you know, it does, but I think we're required to do it, not 100%. Yeah.
But they're not required to be push button, they can be, you can
Passive
have
detection.
self-actuated.
Right.
Yeah.
So that you can have actuated one when you ride over a detector.
It would just stop flashing.
Is that just for bikes, or that works for people walking
Yeah.
and in wheelchairs as well?
Yes, I believe there's.
Yeah, there's like infrared things.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you don't have them that just flash all the time like they do, you know, in England where I grew up, there was like bollards and they flashed all the time.
then
Yeah,
people-
really not, because then they get ignored.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There
Okay.
goes a flashing light over the
Anyway.
crossing on Agate, like mid-block between 13th and like why do we bother? Yeah. So a couple of things here is that the buses will enter the roundabout, so they'll actually have priority over the motor vehicles to the right. But then when they leave the roundabout, they'll leave in a general purpose lane and then they'll slip back into their own lane.
Nifty.
Here, you can see there's like another little exit here. It's because there's some big trucks that bring like, you know, liquid nitrogen to these buildings here, and they need to get back out, and we couldn't get them out this way. It was just the geometry didn't work, so we were giving them another exit down here. This is a protected bike lane. So this, I think you'll see to the east here is protected bike lanes, and to the west is shared use paths.
Are we ready to keep scrolling?
Yeah, sure. And then I don't know why we're not showing a sidewalk here. Maybe because we felt the one on campus isn't that much of out of direction there. And we could talk, you know, I'd be interested in hearing more from the university about that, but, and I think there's some trees in here that they might want to preserve, but that's something maybe we'll look at is, do we need, because this is a protected bike lane here.
How do buses handle the crosswalks?
They stop for people. Now, we've talked about, you know, it's an interesting question, like something LTD is, they're a little worried that drivers aren't going to stop for the buses, like they're going to go out. And so we have talked about signalizing the intersections for buses. And so if we did that, what we might do is actually, for this, on this side, we might actually make it signalized for people walking and biking, that they have to wait, for, you know, when the buses are approaching, they would get a don't walk. And then once the bus is clear through, it will go back to walk. So that's something we're talking about. And I'm not sure if we're gonna do that or not, but
Almost like a railway crossing.
right. And actually, I have another video from Gothenburg where they do that, in another roundabout. Question.
We got 5 more minutes.
No way, okay, so let's keep zooming. So this is our first signalized intersection. It's kind of huge. And we're gonna have, our goal is to have it be a protected intersection for bikes. There's obviously some design details for that missing here.
Is that Agate?
Yeah.
This is Agate, sorry, yeah, and Franklin. The MX station would remain here. We're talking about, this is so this would become a shared use path here. I think there's some design issues here that we need to figure out, because there's a nice planting strip already with this like a 7-foot wide sidewalk, but it's not really a good bike facility. And so is there room to put a bike facility down here that's protected bike lane? We need to kind of figure that out. We may make these raised crosswalks. I don't know, well, that's another thing we'll need to talk about. If you just make a note, just like, are we going to raise crosswalks at the signalized intersections? Okay, why don't we keep zooming east? Sometimes you'll see all this. We have to kind of move to get I'm not a roundabout here. Actually, can you zoom a little more? So, can you go down to maybe like 375% or something, just so you can zoom in? That's good, yeah. This is Moss, so there's actually not you can't cross the street here right now. This is right now 13th comes down here, and Moss is just this little minor intersection. So we're actually doing is bringing 13th across that point of university property here, and then we'll free up some other property down here for UFO. And that way, because right now there's this huge distance from like Villard, from like the east side of Villard to like the west side of Agate, where there's no crosswalk. And,
So this is right by the Net United Arena.
right, the arena's right here. So we would actually have lots of pedestrian crossing and bike crossing opportunities here at a roundabout. So that's that. Let's keep going east. Ballard I mean, to be honest, like our goal, we wanted to have roundabouts at all the intersections. We did some of them, just the impacts to properties or businesses were too much to either for us to afford or just like in terms of more like in terms of what we felt was going to be publicly acceptable. So Ballard is another one where, you know, we're going to keep it as a signal. But I think the geometry will work better here than it does now for everybody. It's very awkward when you're driving here. It's very awkward now. It's getting that left turn. Sometimes you feel like you want to drive into the oncoming traffic. Okay, let's keep going. We're going to close the left turn pocket for Orchard Street for cars there. Oh, and so one thing I didn't point out is so this is a shared use path on the south side here. And then when on the north side, it's a westbound protected bikeway on this. So basically the whole rest of the way, mostly. So then we get to Walnut. This is a mistake. This should show the shared use path in front of the Romania building here. And see, this works really well to be a shared use path on the south side because there's like no driveways on the south side. Like pretty much the entire corridor, there's no driveways on the south side. But the north side, there's actually quite a few driveways. This is more of like a business. That's like where the motels are and all those kind of Eurasian Auto, et cetera, et cetera. So, and then this is the Walnut roundabout. And then continue, and then east to here, it's shared use paths on both sides. So, and then there's another roundabout further down in, well, we went too far. This is, U of O was gonna make some changes to the parking lot here. We don't know if that's gonna happen, but I had a fight to keep this pedestrian and bike crossing here because I think for people coming from the neighborhood and like a lot of runners cross here, it's just a good thing to have because then you have the connection to the Knickerbocker Bridge down there. So that's actually like, I don't know that it's like a critical crossing, but it's a really nice crossing to have for that, just in terms of that connectivity. So I'm not going to keep showing you. There's some Laurel Hill Valley stuff I can show you, but I mean, since we're almost, I want to make sure you guys have a chance to ask questions. But basically, we're making our proposal here. We still have to get ODOT to sign off on is to make the I-5 off ramp two-way, so that we can. Right now, when you're going into Laurel Hill Valley on this path, you're jumping into the valley at the same time cars are zooming in, and it doesn't feel very good. And so we're going to close that access point to Laurel Hill Valley and make it people come in that way. So that's basically the gist of it. It'll be like another roundabout down by Riverview Street. So, but you know, I think in terms of like what we heard from you guys, like gosh, it's been a few years, was like how are the roundabouts going to work for bikes? It doesn't feel very good. So I think like you know, we're really looking at how can we bring the speeds down, making these raised crossings, creating an environment where like the drivers are expected to stop for bikes when you're at the roundabout. This is kind of one of the, and so we're trying to design it so that'll be the dynamic. So are there any questions or comments? Josh?
I feel like we're really short on time and people
Right.
probably have a lot to digest and ask.
Sure.
What's the timeline for this, for the committee to maybe have more conversation and provide feedback?
I mean, I can come back next month, but there's not some, I mean, we're locking down like the design concept, but I don't think it's gonna be set in stone. I think as we go into engineering, like we can tweak things. So,
Yeah, maybe we could propose, like, actually, I can resend this to everyone's inbox and you can take more time to like, look at it and scroll through and generate questions and feedback, and then maybe next meeting, we can like revisit this conversation.
yeah, that'd be fine. I mean, that should be available.
I would suggest that this is such a big and important project that there might be sort of like a technical committee or subcommittee
Sure.
that might sit down and look at some real specific details, because we could spend a lot of time as a whole group
Right.
going back and forth on the large screen. And I think it might be more helpful for people, the whole committee, to say, okay, here, please look at this one, you know, place in this place, in this place. And then a small group of people meet with staff to work those.
I was thinking
Issues
that's
out.
that's a good idea, more helpful. We are kind of out of time. One question that struck me is I'm not entirely sure who Franklin Boulevard is designed to
You go back to
serve.
Walnut, yeah.
Because quite frankly, I mean, I get that, I guess people going to the university use it and people coming out of Laurelwood Valley use it. For the rest of the community, it's like, I never go on Franklin Boulevard and I'm pretty much okay with that, I guess.
Actually,
So,
back to
so I
yeah.
guess I'm wondering, that might change if if it got to be this really happening sort of business, lots of restaurants and cool places along there.
If you're
But,
coming from the east, it's the way into Eugene.
That's what I live in Springfield.
Yeah,
so
but coming from Springfield, if you've been up in the mountains and you have one.
yeah, no, but you also, you could come in at 105, you could go down 30 or 10, depends on where you're going.
Right, so that's
yeah, so-
why it's okay to slow it down. I mean, we still want to
Mm,
let people use it and have that throughput in 2 lanes each way, but we want to, if you want to get through fast, maybe I-105 is like the answer for you,
Yeah,
but that, I think to your point, but it's still, it's a balancing act, right?
mhm, mhm.
I think just to add to that, I think that as a pedestrian, it's terrible to walk, and so many people stay in the hotels to go to events over there. And Matthew Knight Arena was one of the only places doing PCR testing for a while, so we were always going over there, and it was terrible to bike on the north side of Franklin or on the south side as well.
And now they built all those hotels in Glenwood,
Yeah.
and then if we get bike share out there, then people are gonna want to, come, because it's really close.
Yeah, I'm not saying questioning it, but I just think it's worth looking at who are you trying to serve exactly? It's not just necessarily recreational bicycles. And so it just look
Lots
at
of students.
who are you serving now and who in the foreseeable future is this serving? Because that might affect how you.
What's
design
funny,
it.
because when I lived in Laurel Hill Valley and I was biking downtown, I would bike on the sidewalk on the south side past Hiram's Market, because that was the most direct
Oh,
route
yeah.
for me, and legally I can bike on the sidewalk there, there's no driveways. It's a little tight,
Mhm.
but that is there are people who live in that neighborhood that want to get to campus or downtown.
Yeah, we're getting some
And there's a lot
in the
more.
chat questions about the roundabouts. And I think that's probably overall that most likely is the biggest concern is how comfortable and efficient are those.
They won't be like a speed cushion, they'll be a raise the whole way across. Will they be as high as the one on at 13th and Lincoln? I don't know, we need to figure out that design detail.
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you. There's a lot of food for thought and maybe the infrastructure committee would take on arranging some time to get whoever's interested to sit down with staff and kind of hash through some of the details of what we think about this. Just a suggestion. Okay, that takes us to project updates and info share.
I think this is mostly me, and then if anybody else has info that they want to share, but I just had a few updates basically based on some things that have happened recently. Several folks from the ATC were kind of connecting with us about the bike parking at the farmers market and the Saturday market and that whole sort of pavilion area. And Shane went through a lot of running around and securing some bike racks, and we did increase the amount of
And
bike
it's
parking.
much better.
It's much better. It's not in the pavilion, it's not front row, but there is bike parking all around now. And I just am really excited about that. And I think that a lot of that happened because of the ATC. And it's one of those moments where I'm like, oh, the ATC is so awesome because you you really like help the entire community, like everyone who goes over there.
Yeah,
Wine
not
and
finished,
works.
but it is much better. It got done very quickly. So thank you.
Yeah. So it was good synergy between our team and the ATC.
And people are using
Could we
those
get
racks.
people's faces?
Oh, yeah.
back up
Oh,
on the
yeah,
screen?
thanks for that reminder. I can stop sharing. Oh, yeah, because now we can see that Mary has her hand raised. Mary, do you have something you want to add?
No, I didn't, my hand was still up. No, I was just looking at I think we really need to have a firm process as far as the Franklin Boulevard and what we're going to do. So it's not just like infrastructure committee. I think we should, if we could assign it to the infrastructure committee, and then they can design, if they're willing to take it on, can you have a process whereby you maybe have a meeting and invite people to come to it, or, some way to move it forward? And would that be possible for the infrastructure committee to take that on?
I'll speak for us and say yes, I think so. And we can talk about either inviting people to the meeting, or I put in the chat something like, if people can't come to the meeting, we'll send out a survey. And that way people can just submit their comments. So we're not all just spamming each other via email, and then we can have them all collected and kind of deliver what we discuss in a meeting plus comments all to staff in one package. So it's a little more, and maybe before the meeting, so it can be, we can like dive in and not spend time rehashing everything.
That's good. I think we should get like little vehicles and put them, that's what I need to do. That's kind of the level I'm at. Let's get some little bicycles and some little cars and, you know, anyway, but some people are better at it than I am, so.
Let's build it out of Lego.
Can we commission some of those play mats, those play rugs for the project?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, thanks all. Okay, I had the bike parking. I also don't know if folks have noticed, but we did change the signal on 13th and Patterson, where it was like, there was a bike signal and a driving signal, and we have since made it a straight forward only bike signal. So now the people driving and the people biking at the same time. So I just wanted to alert you, that was something we got in the public comment. I know, right? Mind blown. No, it turns out nobody turns when they're biking on Patterson, so they don't need the bike signal, right? Everybody's going straight. So that's the nice thing, is that we made the change, and I think I wrote on it the other day and I was like, oh, this is so nice not to get stuck here.
Willa, my only comment will be, we have data on how few people turn south in general, and more of the arrows, please.
Okay, noted. Yeah,
So
thank you.
I'm happy to pass that data back along if that's helpful.
Yeah, we'll get that in our notes and follow up. Because it is, a lot of those straight arrows are like really nice to notice. Okay, last thing was the ATC logistics, which is really brief. I'm the new staff liaison. I've been doing this for a couple months, but just a reminder, if you have ATC stuff that's going through email, just to CC me on there, just so I can kind of keep up with what you all are doing, or if you have subcommittee meetings, if you send them out to your, the folks on your subcommittee, just CC me on there so I can get them into our folders and just kind of keep things organized and moving smoothly. So that's just a little update there. And I think that's all I have for updates, InfoShare.
Something else that's kind of logistics is, it would be really helpful as we're trying to contact people, if we had a list of, for each person, what the best way to contact them. And I don't care if it's email or a text or whatever, but we can send out emails, but not everybody looks at their email. And then for most of you, I don't have any other way to contact you. And so if you're not going to look at your email until next Sunday, that doesn't help. So I don't know what the best way to gather whatever contact information you're willing to give, but that would be really helpul if we could. And maybe we can just shoot a sheet of paper around the
I was
table
gonna
here.
say that we do have the sign-in sheet with everybody's name on it for the folks who are in the room. If you did want to just write down next to your name, preferred contact method and what it is.
Yeah.
And then for folks online, if you want to just put your preferred contact method, and what it is in the chat, and I can record that. That can be a really easy way to just take care of it right now.
Yeah, or if you don't want it in the chat. you
Don't
could
in
just
the
use-
chat. Don't put it in the chat. It's on
Yeah.
YouTube.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so,
Um,
yeah, so just send it to Willow.
Yeah, I'll put my email in the chat, which is perfectly fine to be public, and you can send me your preferred contact method and information, but this piece of paper is very secure.
Speaking of logistics real quick, is there any city infrastructure for like a listserv or mailing lists? I know that like coming in when I did, not having any history of like reading the mail or like reading the stuff that had happened a month or two before, that would have been beneficial. I don't know if there's any infrastructure for that.
As far as the ATC like notes and things like.
Yeah, so like the subcommittees, like if the subcommittees had a mailing list that we could like subscribe whoever was on, and then that would make it easy to see like history as well. I do that for other groups I'm involved in. But I don't know if the city has anything like that set up for.
Yeah, I can talk with the chairs in our team about that. We do put the like full meeting notes on our website, but as far as the subcommittee and like listservs and stuff goes, I don't think we have that set up, so I can.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great.
Okay,
Is there still time for InfoShare or?
We're out of
Okay.
time.
well, I don't know what scheduled plans, I don't exactly know what that is.
That was basically for us to talk about how this just went with the hybrid thing, and if we want to do hybrid next month, or what people were thinking. We have 5 minutes to talk about it.
What do you think?
Yeah, it was fun.
I love the owl.
I
It's
like
my
it.
first time using an owl in a meeting and I think it's really interesting.
That's the name of the camera, yeah.
That's a camera.
Everyone wait for the owl.
So it
Yeah, you
moves.
guys are on there. You gotta come see the owl.
I don't know how it is for the audience,
Someone else.
those attending on the live stream, but it's fine. It's interesting. There you go. Maybe it seems to think it works okay.
Well, we'll see y'all here next month. Oh, I will make a quick note that if you are gonna come in person, if you come in through the alleyway and park at that bike rack, or just bring your bike into the building, you can totally bring your bike into the building, and that way, us as a team, we just have to watch one door to let you all in from the locked building. So coming in through the alleyway will be easier than coming in next to the library, so I'll just make that.
I'll just say really quick that I just wanted to highlight that that I was part of the Learn to Ride, and Justin was there too, and I'm not sure who else was there, but Safe Routes to School did their second Learn to Ride this year. And it was really phenomenal, just to see, 25 kids start out just on balance bikes, and most of them in pedaling bikes at the end. And Sue was there as an instructor, and just like the beauty and power of that and the fun. I highly encourage people to get involved with that. Like if there's other volunteer opportunities, it's a really great thing. I'm really excited Sarah and Safe Routes team started doing that, and is engaging the community partners to make it happen. It's a really powerful and needed thing. So it's,
It's interesting to see how often it's really nice for it not to be the parent that's telling the kid what to do. You got this anonymous strangers making these suggestions. They're much more open to it sometimes. Mom, it's kind of fun.
So much fun. So yes, volunteer, honestly.
Yeah.
They're gonna do more of this the next few months, and we're hoping they get bigger. So definitely volunteer.
Okay, so subcommittee report back, and listed as an A is the Willamette Street walkthrough, which was actually kind of took the place of the infrastructure committee, and I think Andrew agreed to report back on that.
I did agree to that.
Rather feisty little encounter.
I did agree to that. So yeah, we did a walkthrough. Reed was there, and there were a couple of business owners, a number of ATC members. The business owners were primarily, I think, from the Meridian building. And
So
I
the
guess,
topic was Willamette just between 18th and 20th.
yeah,
converted.
exactly. And so we kind of toured around, we looked. There are definitely a few things that we all noticed. I will say the business owners were pretty critical of the change, and they gave a list of issues from their perspective to everyone who came. So Reed got that, and I assume was passed on to other city staff. I think ATC members were, I think, a lot of discussion and mixed feelings is what I would say about how those concerns were. A lot of them were around like parking and vehicle access type things, and whether or not the change was for the better. So I don't know that we had anything definitive or conclusive come out of that. I think some of the things we looked at, I mean, we got down and like measured the lanes on 19th, because there are a lot of issues with like sight lines on 19th. The angles with the I don't know what to call them, kind of where the bike lane jogs in and the cars have a bump out. And so those are pretty sharp angles. And so I think that there are definitely some lessons learned for the city. But there was a lot of discussion about kind of how everything works. I don't know, Mary, you said I summed it up well. I'm not sure I did, because that was super vague. But we did do the walkthrough, and we listened to the business owners' concerns, and Reed was there, and he definitely, I think, did a good job of being empathetic, but also representing that the change, it impacts the whole city. And so kudos to Reed for, I think, doing a really good job of being empathetic, but also, representing the merits of trying to do the project. And also, some of the things that came out of it were that the business owners were actually interested in seeing like the parking outside of the Meridian on the southeast side potentially become turn lane, which would allow left turns on Willamette, which is something that's currently not allowed and an issue for some people. So there's actually a lot of areas of common agreement, but I think overall we determined in the walkthrough that it's really complicated and that city staff are trying and that they're going to keep trying, and that it's not totally done. Kind of like 13th, it's not totally done. We're experimenting and we're trying, and it was, I think, really positive for everyone to kind of go and see that. That's my takeaway.
Anyone else who was involved in that? Yeah, thank you, Andrew. That was, Mary?
Well, I just wanted to say, I put it in the notes, but we do have a brief written report of how it went that we'll send to everybody. And Reed did a really nice job, I thought, in responding to a lot of the issues. And he had a written report too that he sent to us. So now I think we can send those two documents that, like Andrew said, it's not like final or anything, but there was a lot of information in those two documents, and we'll send those two documents out to all of the ATC members so that you're up to date on that.
Yeah, and I too would be kudos to Reed, because the business owners came in quite irate, frankly, and at least they felt listened to. They felt like they had had a chance to give their piece and get a response, and that was helpful. Okay, other committees, the programs education, anything to report?
Can Mary report back on that? Actually, I remember, I don't have the notes with me, so I feel like she wrote the notes. for that.
Oh, gosh, I
That
didn't.
was a long time ago. I'm just
Well, I just know what we're working on right now is really working with 4J and how many cars go back and forth all the time to all the different schools. And we're just wondering if there's a way we can have any kind of impact on that. So we've been discussing that. And then some of us are starting to meet with different people to get opinions about how we might create change or how change could be created. So we already met with actually Dan Wilson, who's a 4J past ATC member and 4J parent. And then we've got other people that we're kind of lined up just to get information from them about how that might happen. We're thinking it's a slow game that we're playing here. We're not going to change anything overnight, but we think that would be a really good thing to focus on because it's a huge impact for those of you who've seen the cars just backed up at the schools all the time. So we have a lot of different things we want to do, and we wanted to talk with Anne about possible research. So it's a pretty active committee, I would say, right now.
I just say something about, if you guys haven't seen the video of Sam Balto's bike bus that's going on in Portland right now, definitely look that up. The Alameda bike bus, it's blowing up on social media and it's really fun. I had like parents sending me like, have you heard of this? Like, yeah, I know that. And it's really impressive what he's done with it. And I know that I had a parent at Village School who's like, let's do one for our school. All right, let's do it. So,
Yeah, that's definitely something we've looked at, and it's like, yeah, if we could get that to happen.
it really shows what a champion can do,
Yeah.
because it is just Sam Balto, the PE teacher there, just like rallying the troops and, making a party out of it. And like, there's organization that goes on of like, we meet here at this time and we're gonna end up here and we need road marshals to sort of make it safe, but, and turn it into a gathering, and now has half the kids at the school joining in on this bike train.
Yeah, and Dan sent us something that was sort of a how-to, was from, what's his name, Sam Balto?
Sam Balto.
But, yeah, so it's definitely possible if we've got interested families and a champion of the school, it's definitely possible. So, be a fun thing to look into. Okay, Gosh, that brings us to the end of our agenda with 3 minutes to
Well, there's
spare.
the,
Anything else?
Communication.
Oh, communications committee, we kind of didn't meet.
We didn't meet, but I did report back and I wanted to report back kind of to everyone. One of the things that I've been encouraging the communications subcommittee to do, and it's, been on a kind of voluntary basis, is to the extent people want to follow what's going on social media and to be able to be the go-between between city staff and the public. And so there's been a couple of issues that have been raised. One, which we've talked about here, is the closure of the sidewalk on 24th, where a bunch of parents were getting all upset, which understandably so. And another had to do with an out of compliance ramp up near the Sheldon High School. And in both cases, as you can imagine, these were both on Nextdoor, by the way. People start having all sorts of speculations and making accusations, and it's usual social media kind of banter. And in both cases, I was able to say, let me contact the person in the city, because I know who it is that's going to deal with this. And I've been able, and I'll get back to you. In both cases, I've been able to get some information, get back to and post on that. And people are really, it just sort of like cuts all the negativity off, and people really appreciate it. So I think it had beyond just the simple or the physical knowledge that people have about what's going to happen. It also has a way of like calming our city down in an ever so slight way that is important in our times.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you.
And I would also point out that by our next meeting, the election will have happened and we'll know whether the street bond measure passed. So if anyone has questions, we're not, as the ATC, we're not taking a position on it one way or the other, but certainly if people have questions about it, try to either answer them yourself or direct them to Alan or me or the city staff, to get answers. Okay. It's great to see you guys. Thanks a lot.
Might be a pandemic. It's kind of a
Can
you turn off the owl so we can have the